lot of times when you see some of the most gruesome crimes that appear like this person had to have done this before, then you realize there's multiple causes of death. They're very inexperienced. So that's why you're seeing this didn't work. So they're trying this, or they're not really, they've never killed before. So they don't realize the damage that they've done is enough to kill somebody. So it's overkill. So these are all the things you're trying to assess when, in what I'm going to say, it's not easy, and you're not always going to be right. It's really just trying to compile all the available information into, into this assessment.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to the Another Nobody Show with me, your favorite nobody, Travis Myers. Today's guest, I think, is a very, very interesting woman. Her name is Julia Cowley, and she is a forensic scientist and an FBI profiler. And we're going to hear how she got started and a little bit about her life today. So let's get with it. Hey Julia, how you doing?
Doing well, Travis. How are you?
Good. So glad to see you. And I tell you, I have said it a couple of times now. I really think that when we got together the other day at the, the True Crime Podcasters Festival, I think you were my favorite conversation that I had there.
I would say the same about you. I had a great time. And this is probably the first time I've done a podcast or a show where I actually have already met the person in person.
Oh, really?
I think so. Usually when I've done other interviews, I haven't met the person in person yet. So this is a first. Yeah. So
actually,
we've already met.
I actually do it quite a bit because I reach out to people I know who have good stories, or people that I meet along the way, like again with the crime con kind of things and whatever. I'll meet people, and when I kind of click with them, I immediately ask, hey, you want to come on and have a conversation? And I think again, you and I definitely clicked when we met, and we had a great little sit down and a great talk.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. It was my first podcast festival, so to speak, that I'd ever been to. I didn't know what to expect, and we met early on, and it was a great evening to talk with you and your wife. I had a great time. Yeah,
it was a good festival all the way around, and
it was very good. I was exhausted afterwards.
Am I going to see you in September at CrimeCon?
You are.
All right.
Yes,
all right.
I'm excited about that. I'm an introverted person who likes to talk to people. So these types of events, while I really enjoy myself, can be extremely exhausting for me.
Oh, it takes a lot out of you?
It does take a lot out of me, but I enjoy it. I love talking with people. I think that's why I liked my job in the FBI, because I got to talk to a lot of different people, and I learned so many different things about different industries. Depending on a case I was investigating, you learn so much. So I always enjoyed the opportunity to talk to people that were criminals and non-criminals.
Well, actually, I will concur with you completely on that. And I don't know what it is about my personality, but I love to have conversations with people. And both in my time at NYPD and as a pub owner, I would own bars for years. Just getting into conversations with people that, you would never think, you would never think you would have a commonality with. But again, like you say, bad guys, I might be locking you up because you did something wrong. That doesn't mean you're not a really interesting person.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, since I think you're an interesting person and I want to share you with the world, all right, let's talk a little bit about Julia Cowley here. So, what got you started? I mean, I'm sure it was something in college. What got you started or pointed you towards forensic science and the FBI?
Well, long before college.
Long
before college. I knew from a very young age. I read Helter Skelter, the book written by Vincent Bugliosi on the Manson murders. And I was pretty young. I think I was in middle school. My mom was reading it. She told me I wasn't allowed to read it. I took it after she was done. I read it, and I just never looked back. I was always interested, an avid reader of true crime. And I knew I wanted to do something in law enforcement. I wanted to somehow help solve murders. And then in high school, I got one of those big books. I don't know if you remember those big books that had all the lists of college majors. It was like as big as a phone book. was
Well,
huge. And you
I didn't finish high school, so no, I don't know about those big college books.
Okay, so at the time, back when I like now you can go online and look at these things, but this there was a big book of college majors, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
I knew, yeah, I was an athlete. I was in sports in high school. I loved true crime. That was about it. I didn't really like much more. And I got one of these big books, and I was just flipping through it, and I found a major called police science, which is basically what we know as forensic science. And I
Yes.
read the description of it. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to work in a crime lab. I'd love to go to crime scenes and collect the evidence. I thought that was always a very interesting part of the cases that I read when I would read these true crime books. So I decided to major in chemistry because at the time there were very few schools. I don't even know if there were any that had an actual forensic science major.
Hmm.
And plus, I grew up in Oregon, and it was kind of a given that I was going to go to the University of Oregon. That was my dream school. And I don't want to brag. And I don't think I'm better than anybody else because I went to the University of Oregon. I always joke like that, but it really was my dream school. So it was a good thing that it was the state school. And, but no major, the closest thing was either like biology or chemistry. I preferred chemistry over biology. I never really loved biology all that much. So I majored in chemistry, and then I got a master's degree in forensic science.
Hmm.
And then I spent about 11 months working for a biotech company because I couldn't find a job in a crime lab. And I was applying to a lot of different states. And I was fortunate enough to be hired by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. So I moved from um, Oregon to, well, actually, no, California, because that's where I was working for the biotech company at the time after graduate school. Moved to Tennessee, where I worked for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation in their crime lab. It was the best decision I ever made of my whole life.
Yeah,
Just
nice to hear.
leaving my life behind and moving to a state that I'd only visited the one time for my interview. So that's how I got into it. But just my avid, I don't know if enjoyment is the right word, interest in true crime and reading about how the cases are solved and trying to understand why people do what they do.
Well, I can understand that because much like myself, it was funny. Growing up as a street kid in New York City, we weren't always so fond of the police because when they showed up, it was to chase us off the corner, to take our beer, to toss us, which is stop and frisk us to see if we had any weapons on us. That was very common in my neighborhood, because we were you know little street rats hanging out. That's what we did as teenagers. But the when something serious would happen and the detectives would show up, there was something about them with their, sports coats and their pinky rings and the, hey kid, come on over here, tell me what you know kind of thing, that they struck me as cool. And I just always liked the idea of getting bad guys. And that's just really what it came down to. Like, in fact, while in the police department, I never took a sergeant's exam or well, I didn't take a sergeant's exam, so of course I could never take a lieutenant's exam. Because once you become a sergeant, you are no longer chasing bad guys. You are now an administrator, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the investigative route is when you become a detective. And that was always the thing to me, was to get the bad guys. So yeah, I had an interest, not so much as a young boy, but as later on in my teens, I was like, yeah, I think that's the gig for me, being a detective. And
Yeah.
luckily that's what happened to me.
And
So
I think that's a good example for people in law enforcement today how you can influence younger kids and young adults
absolutely.
by, you know, just they see you, they want to emulate you, they want to do what you do. And some police officers and detectives, and when you see that, they're like role models.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
We have to
Well, I always
remember
say
that.
I always say to young cops too, when I'm having these kind of talks is, you're never going to save the world. You can get that out of your head because that's not going to happen, you know, but you can absolutely make a difference in an individual's life. That's a fact. You can do that dozens and dozens of times in your career. And you always kind of want to be the guy, especially when you're on patrol or as a detective, that's going to show up at your mother's house at your sister's house when something serious happens. You want to be that guy for everybody, you know? And I don't know. So yes, you want to be somebody that can be, like you say, looked up to and emulated.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
something to remember. The people are watching you.
absolutely, absolutely.
And
And back to just a step back a little bit to what you said about chemistry leading you into the FBI, and well, actually to a lab, and then later on
yeah,
to the FBI.
then the
Um,
FBI.
I tell young guys that too, who want to take, maybe some police classes in college or something like that. I say you want to do well and definitely be picked up by the police department or something that we call it ESU, Emergency Services in New York City, but what everybody likes, the SWAT team, because I think that's cool. You know, become become a locksmith. Learn how to
Hmm.
weld. Learn how to weld. If you can weld, and people think, welding, what are you talking about? Yeah, if you can show up with a torch and take a door off its hinges, you're valuable. If you can pick a lock, you're valuable. Now you're
Right.
giving something to the police department that it needs, as opposed to having to train you for or send you to school for. But
Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it. To have a skill that's
absolutely,
unique that you can offer, whether
absolutely.
it's a skill like that or a particular background or career that you have that's different than maybe that what other people have. And but the one thing I'd also say is make sure you enjoy it. So,
Oh,
if you
absolutely.
enjoy it, you're going to be good at it because you're
Yeah,
going to
you'll shine. You'll shine.
yeah, exactly.
And
But
that's
you're
what
you're
that's with any
absolutely
job.
right.
People that
Yeah.
hate their jobs are never good at their jobs.
That's
That's a
true.
simple fact. That's-
Yeah. Yeah, that it doesn't help.
So you ended up landing in Tennessee,
Right?
okay, working for the state,
Yes.
and then what
And
brought you to the
then
FBI?
I had a coworker and well, first of all, I was true crime books because I read a couple books at the time. I read The Blooding by Joseph Wambaugh, which was
Mhm.
about DNA, that's what led me to the lab. And then I read Mindhunter by John Douglas, which was about his career in the FBI as a profiler. And I got interested in that. So my interest in the FBI was piqued very much by John Douglas. And also, I have to say, by The Silence of the Lambs. I,
Ah,
I
interesting.
really love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies to this day.
I saw that. I saw that with my wife when we were first dating, and her parents at a movie theater in the Bronx when it first came out. So I
Yeah,
remember it well.
I I've watched it so many times, but there was one time where I was at my grandmother's house and she insisted on seeing it because it had won so many Academy Awards, and we're like, no, grandma, no, no. And she was insistent. You really didn't say no to grandma. And when certain parts came on, I remember just being like, I can't enjoy this movie watching this with my grandma, but she would sit there in her chair and say, oh, they never had things like this on the screen when I was younger. And I was just so embarrassed. But so anyway, my interest was piqued already. But then I had a coworker in the laboratory who joined the FBI. And he was somebody that I really admired. And he I guess I wouldn't say he talked me into it, but he encouraged me to also apply to the FBI. So I sort of followed in his footsteps a few years after he left. And that's how I ended up in the FBI. I think I probably would have ended up there eventually, even without his encouragement, but he really just motivated me. And
Okay.
he helped me through the application process, like explaining what I should expect, and then I think that was really helpful.
Cool. All right. So then
Yeah.
you what is it? Quantico? Is that where you went?
Yeah. Went to Quantico training, which at the time was 16 weeks. And
Hmm.
it's a combination of classroom, defensive tactics, firearms, tactical vehicle operations. It's everything, you
Now let
know.
me ask you. So you're being hired for a specific talent that you have, like
Hmm.
many people in the FBI or the CIA or any of these things. People think you're a cool FBI agent or CIA agent. Like you're some kind of secret agent type person. But in reality, quite often, you can be an accountant, and that's the
Yes.
speciality that's needed. You know.
Yeah.
Um, so you're hired for this, but everybody takes the same uh, uh, courses.
Yes. So they're all different backgrounds in the
It is like a
FBI.
simple FBI academy that everybody does the same thing, and then you go into your
Yes.
specialties afterwards.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And but so I shouldn't say exactly. So you have the academy where everyone gets the basic training. And
Hmm.
then during the academy, you get your assignment, what field office you will be assigned to. Once you get into your field office, and I would tell you, the FBI, as much as maybe I was hired because I had this science background and eventually I knew I'd want to be on an evidence response team. The FBI doesn't really care what
No.
your background. No, generally not, unless it's something so specific and so needed. And even with my background, which was somewhat unique, it still wasn't just this high priority need. So it's really the needs of the Bureau. So, whatever office you're going to where they happen to have vacancies on a squad, that's where you're going to go.
Hmm.
Typically, as a new agent, you're going to get assigned to something that you may not think is a right fit for you or what you had
Sure.
hoped for. So, when I first my first assignment was to the Boston division. I was assigned to bank fraud. And I had no background, no financial background. I mean, I had a lot of math courses when I was in college because I was a chemistry major, but I really didn't have any financial background, didn't really know much about banking. But that's where they had the opening. That's where they put me. I thought I would have been better suited for a violent crime squad because of my background in going to crime scenes and processing homicide scenes and things like that. But the Bureau had uh, something else in mind for me. So
Yeah.
you just, and when you join the FBI, you sign on the line that you will take any assignment that you're
Yes.
given. You don't have really a choice. So I knew I could very well end up on a white collar squad. That was a very high priority at the time. And I did. So, and there's one way, there's, I guess, two different ways you can approach that. You can be disappointed and that reflects in your work, or you can embrace it and do your best and be an optimist. And I chose to do my best
It's the
because I,
same.
yeah,
It's the
you
same
know,
in the military or in the police, any police department. You know, when you show up, it's a matter of, are you going to be a good soldier and do what you're told? Are you going to be a good cop and, stand on that corner in the rain for hours at a time because that's what you're told to do? And if you back to what we said before, if you enjoy what you're doing and you understand where you're going, you'll shine and you'll do well. You know.
yeah. Yeah, and I just chose to try to have a positive attitude. I tend to have a positive attitude about most everything. Well, maybe not everything, but somebody once called me the happiest cynical person they ever met, and I think
Ah,
that's probably a pretty good description of me.
I like it. Yeah.
But yeah, so I got on bank fraud, and I spent about 3 years on that squad. It really was a great experience. I learned how to work white collar cases, be very detailed, do document cases. At the same time, I joined because of my background in forensics. I didn't have to wait for any probationary period to join the evidence response team. So I was picked up by the evidence response team right away. So I was a brand new agent on that team, and which is not that's unusual.
Mhm.
But I think that benefited my forensic background, benefited me, and it's a perishable skill. So they put me right on the team. They said you don't have to wait for 2 years before we pick you up for the team. So I was doing that, and I did enjoy it quite a bit. And then I got transferred to public corruption, civil rights,
Mhm.
and that was after 9/11, shortly after 9/11, where they disbanded the squad that I was on, and we all kind of got scattered to different squads. And the supervisor on the public corruption squad at the time, I guess, appreciated my attitude and requested that I come to that squad. And again, I think it's the most fortunate thing that ever happened to me because it was, I mean, not only a great environment with the people that I worked with, but there's a lot of diversity when you're working public corruption and civil rights. It's not just necessarily working, you're investigating public officials, but there are all sorts of different violations you could be exposed to, whether
Mhm.
it's extortion, bribery. I had a public official selling drugs. So it touched on a lot of different violations, and I just loved it. I spent several years doing that and
Well,
working on the evidence response team.
that's another thing too. That the different things that you do really is so much more of an education. You know, where if you were really wonderful, with again, what was it that you wanted to do? The evidence collection. You know,
Yes.
I mean,
Hmm.
you could have stayed there for 20 years and been happy, had a good career, gotten ahead, been promoted, et cetera, et cetera. But how much less would you have learned along the way?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for being an expert and doing that for your entire
Oh no,
career.
like
And,
I
and
said, there's nothing wrong with it,
yeah, but
but
it wasn't for me.
variety is the spice of life.
Yeah.
You know,
I did want a little more variety than, I mean, most of the time when I was in the laboratory, I was in the laboratory, and I really enjoyed when we get called out to crime scenes, and they weren't often. I mean, it wasn't like an everyday thing because we were called out to the real whodunits, and we were called out to the more rural areas of Tennessee where they needed assistance in processing a crime scene. So
yes.
it just wasn't something that was a constant. It was quite a bit. We were pretty busy, but I that was my favorite part of the job,
Mhm.
was going out and doing the crime scenes. And so the lab work became a little mundane for me, and I decided I needed a
Here's
little more
something. Here's
variety.
something that our listeners might like to hear about, and I'd like to hear a little more about it, even though I think I have an understanding of it. But so the FBI again is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and you handle federal crimes. However, you do often, like you just say, will be called in to assist on other crimes, especially in smaller municipalities where they have nobody to help them. Like I know within the NYPD, as large as we are, rarely do we. I've personally never worked with the FBI. However, many of my friends, my brother included, and different guys I know, once they were dragged into after 9/11 JTTF, Joint Terrorist Task Force, they worked hand in hand with the FBI all day, every day. They had FBI members or CIA members that were bosses for them. But what explained to us a little bit, okay, again, how a crime would fall to the local municipality first, but the FBI may come in to assist and or even take over the case.
Yeah. So a lot of times we just may assist because we have technology to
Correct.
assist. So and a department may say, "Oh, can you do a cell phone analysis on this case?"
Mhm.
And but then there are other times where there's a crime, like for example, a murder in and of itself is not a federal crime.
Correct.
But if there's some kind of federal nexus, like the kidnapping's involved, or it crosses state lines, or the the wires used, like internet or
Mhm.
phone or mail, you have to have kind of that federal
Sure.
nexus to for the FBI to get involved, or you have to have a request from a police department that they need assistance because the FBI has technology or manpower that they may not have. So we will get involved at the request of other people. Now, certain crimes, just the FBI does take over a big terrorist event, for
Sure.
example, terrorist attack of some sort, mass murders. A lot of times the FBI will be involved in those as well. There's usually a federal nexus to
Right.
those that we have. We have the jurisdiction,
Mhm.
so a lot of times we just know right away. And certainly public corruption cases, bank fraud cases, anything that defrauds like a federally insured bank of some sort. um
And of
oh
course,
gosh,
anything that crosses a state line in any
I
way.
mean, really, you could probably find a federal nexus to any type of crime because bad guys are using phones, bad guys. So there's all you could probably find some kind of nexus, no matter how weak it may be.
Mhm.
But obviously, the FBI won't get involved in everything because it may not meet a specific threshold. I mean, we, like everything else, is as big as we are, that we have manpower issues too. So there are priorities for the FBI. So, and in every every office is different. They may have different priorities. They may have different crime problems in the area. You may have a big office, but then the small satellite offices are maybe in another part of the state or maybe even a whole nother state, and there's a different crime problem. So your office has to adjust to what is going on in, that area and that territory.
Hmm. All right. So now we're still in Massachusetts at the moment, right?
I'm still there. Yes.
No, no, no. I mean, not now where you live now, but
No, I know what you meant. Yeah. Yeah, we're going
in
back in time.
yeah,
Yeah.
back in time,
Yep.
we're still in the
Still
Boston
there.
area,
Still in
and you're
Boston.
enjoying it, and you're learning a
Love
lot.
it. Hmm.
Okay. When did, and of course, if there's more stuff that happened before then, please let me know. But what got you pulled into profiling? Because I know our listeners are going to really want to hear about profiling, because that's always
Yep.
such an interesting topic, especially on television. You know.
Yeah. Well, I joined the FBI with, I guess, the hope that I wanted to be a profiler, just the dream, I guess. It was a dream, but
Sure.
also knowing I might not ever get that opportunity. And so I joined with that focus in mind, like maybe someday. And I had the opportunity within the Boston division. They have what's called the local coordinators, and the coordinators are the liaisons between the local agencies in your territory and the FBI's behavioral analysis unit. So we had an opening in our office. I applied for it, and it was an extra responsibility like the evidence response team. And I was very fortunate that I had a supervisor that was very supportive, because some supervisors don't want you working on anything else other
Yes.
than your main violation. So, which really just made me work harder for him. So,
Yes.
the fact he was so supportive, I'm like, I can't let him down, and I don't want him to think he made a mistake by allowing me to have this extra duty. So, I became the coordinator, and that gave me a lot of exposure to the types of cases that the behavioral analysis unit was working on. It gave me exposure to a lot more violent crime, because the cases that BAU tends to work on tends to be more violent crime. Now, that's not the case, not every case, but
Mhm.
mostly, and especially back then at the time. So while I was working public corruption and civil rights, I and with the evidence response team, I was exposed to violent crime as well. I got more exposure to the violent crime. I got exposure to the FBI's BAU, and then after doing that for a few years, there was an advertisement for an opening in the unit I wanted to be in, which was
Oh.
the crimes against adults unit. Now, at the time, there were three units. There was crimes against children, crimes against adults, and a terrorism threat unit.
Mhm.
And the only unit I wanted to be in was the crimes against adult unit. I thought that would be suited to my strengths and my interests. So there was an opening. I applied for it and I got it, much to
Very good.
my amazement. Really, it's these positions, at least at the time. I don't know how it is now because I've been gone for a while, but they were very competitive, and
Yes.
they were few and far between. So I I thought, I've done a lot of work with BAU. People know me, but they know a lot of people. And there are a lot of people and talented people just like me in the FBI that are applying for this very position. So it was very competitive. And I couldn't believe I got it, to be honest. I couldn't believe it. It was a dream come true.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So I moved from Boston down to Virginia, where the behavioral analysis unit is located, and went through training there.
And how long is that training? I mean,
That's
it's basically like you go to college, right? It's a college
yeah,
course.
pretty much.
Right.
It was 16 weeks. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was quite in depth. It was almost all classroom work, and it was topics on um, abnormal psychology. We spent a week in the Baltimore medical examiner's office, and because we had a relationship with them, so we went to training there. I spent some time over in the FBI's laboratory learning about all the different units and what they do. We worked on cases as a class. I think there were 10 agents in my class
Mhm.
who were being trained to become profilers. And so that was a big class. That was one of the bigger classes they probably ever had. Like a couple, sometimes they'll just have like 4 people in a class. But this was quite a few people, and we were all going to different units.
Hmm.
Well, I was the only one going to the adult unit. Everybody else was either going to terrorism or the crimes against children's unit. But you sit in class for 8 hours a day for 16 weeks
Yes.
practically.
Well, that's something that people don't realize either. With I just compared it to a college course, but I remember myself, my first time truly going to school was in the Army, and it's 8.5 hours a day. you know
Hmm.
you break for lunch and you go back to school. And the police academy, the NYPD, was the same thing. It was a full day, 5 days a week, and we switched days, nights to kind of get you used to that. But it was an all day thing. It's not like you're going to go to class for 2 hours a day and study, or hang out in the rec room the rest of the time. You go to
No,
school all day. They get their money's worth out of you.
they do. And it's different than the academy because with the academy, there was also a lot of physical activity. You had your physical training as well, and you were
Yes.
out at the firearms range. And that truly was being in class, in
Mhm.
the classroom.
Yes.
Now, with that said, it went by so fast because we were being exposed to different types of cases. We were working through them, profiling cases, working with the mentors and instructors, and we had experts come in from the outside to train us on different aspects, like on abnormal psychology, on psychopathy. I mean, just all sorts of topics.
Yes.
And I found it was fascinating.
Oh
So it
yeah.
went
Well,
by pretty fast.
that makes it go so much easier when you're really into it. Now,
Yeah.
and how much of this, because it's not all, we think of it, when I say we now, not as me, a police detective, but the public, okay, our listeners, so to speak, think of profiling strictly as being psychological, but there's much more to it than that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that certainly you're trying to understand somebody's mindset, why they do
Correct.
what they do. But it's really applying your investigative background, not necessarily all your psychology background, but your investigative background. Now, some people that I worked with did have degrees in psychology, and there were people that worked as psychologists or had PhDs in psychology. That was not my background.
Hmm.
So my strength was my forensic background. But I mean, you're applying that. You're trying to, let's say, look at a case. I'm just going to take, let's say, a homicide and try to look at the interaction between the offender and the victim and try to draw information from that, such as what is the motive, and what and all and the whole case, the whole crime scene and everything goes into trying to make that assessment. What's the motive? What is the risk of the victim? Like, who posed this victim risk? So looking at their victimology, and then drawing from that, trying to determine what are the characteristics of the offender.
Hmm.
And what we mean by characteristics, yeah, we may look at, demographic type characteristics. We may look at, okay, what do we think the relationship is between this particular offender and this victim? What are some personality traits and characteristics that we think this offender may possess that others may recognize? So much that goes into like developing a profile. And it's not just that, it's also looking at behavior in a crime and maybe linking crimes together. Do you have a series of crimes? Or
Yes.
are there some earlier crimes in a different area of, let's say, a state, and then another area, cluster of crimes? Are they committed by the same person? Because you don't always have forensic evidence that could link crimes together. So you're looking at behavior.
Interesting. Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
And again, like I say, I think so many people think it's strictly psychology, but there's so many little things that fall into it. Like you mentioned demographics, neighborhood, region, literally, you know, uh,
Yeah.
what kind of food you find in the trash. Any little piece of evidence can point you in a direction to build a profile on an individual.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to profiling, there may be a misconception that we're diagnosing people. And while we do apply psychological concepts, we're not diagnosing them.
Mhm.
Now, some of the characteristics that we observe, or I guess predict that maybe this particular offender may have, could align with certain, personality disorders, or you know, things like that. But we're not saying, okay, this person is a psychopath or this person is a narcissist. We may describe characteristics that are in line with that.
Correct.
So we're not diagnosing. And we really, like, even when we write our reports, we really aren't discussing a lot of psychological terms or things like that. Um, they're much more matter of fact and straightforward than going off into the world of psychology. But again, we do have training in psychology, and I rely on some of my colleagues that have a better understanding of the field of psychology than I do, while they rely on me because I have a good understanding of crime scenes and reconstruction, things like that.
Well, sure, because everybody on the team brings a little something different to the party.
Can't do it by yourself.
That's
I
right.
found that you can
That's
you
right.
can maybe come up with a few things, but you're so much better off when you have additional people that are working together. I mean, this things that you don't think of, or they bring an
Absolutely.
expertise or an experience that I may not have.
Right. You know what, Julia? Let's take a
Yeah.
real quick break right now, just for 2 minutes for our sponsors, all right? And we're going to come back and hear a lot more from you because I'm loving this conversation so far. This is a 2024 American Eagle gold coin, which I bought along with several others last year. I'm very happy to report that its value has gone up over 40% in the first year. See, I was encouraged to buy some gold by a financial advisor friend who suggested I be more diversified with my investments. She said gold and silver was a very safe place to park some money, as well as a good hedge against inflation. So I took her advice, and all I can say is I wish I had bought more, as it's been so very, very good to us so far. Now, I purchased these gold coins from the good people over at stackingboise.com, who could not have been nicer, more knowledgeable, or more helpful. Now, I'm certainly no financial expert, but I will say from experience, if you're looking to make an investment, buy yourself some gold. And some real gold that you could hold in your hand, just like this coin you see here. And if you do, then do like I did and get with the good folks over at stackingboise.com. I'm telling you, they're good people, they took good care of me, and they'll take good care of you. Again, that's stackingboise.com. And hey, tell them Travis sent you. Hey, how you doing? Another nobody here, Travis Myers. This one's going out in particular to all my drinking friends out there, because I got a new favorite thing, and it's called Shanky's Whip, and it is magical. It's Irish whiskey mixed with a little caramel, a little cream, a little vanilla, and it's heavenly. What more can I say? I suggest you pick up a bottle. You can have it as a shot with a cold beer, like I like. On the rocks, it's great. Mix it with a little cola. I promise you, you're going to love this stuff. Next time you raise a glass, think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. Hey, do the right thing. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my nonsense. All the best, my friends.
Buy our books!
Hey there, true crime fans. Let me introduce you today to the Cold Case Initiative. The Cold Case Initiative is a foundation that donates money to smaller police agencies all over the country. It does this in order to offset the costs of scientific, forensic, and DNA testing with the hope of solving cold case homicides and other horrific violent crimes that otherwise would remain unsolved. Please, if you have it in your heart,
and a little money to spare, go to www.coldcaseinitiative.org. Again, that's www.coldcaseinitiative.org, and lend a hand where it truly is needed. Be a part of solving a cold case. Every little bit helps. Know that 100% of the donations that go to the Cold Case Initiative go to agencies that are desperately in need of the help. So please, if you can, do the right thing and make a donation. Thanks, and all the best, my friends.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Here I am with my new best friend here, Julia Cowley, talking about her time in the FBI. And something I wanted to touch on real quick, because I know our listeners are going to like it. Okay, you said that you had one of the things that got you into the FBI was reading Mindhunter, right? Now, Mindhunter, most of us know as the I believe it was Netflix special, and it was so huge a few years ago when it was out. Um, and so, I guess, did they get it right? Did you find the series fairly accurate to your time in the FBI?
It's some parts of it. Well, first of all, I'm going to say I love the show. I
Yes.
absolutely loved it.
We
And
enjoyed it very much. We
yeah,
loved it when we watched it.
yeah, and I know there obviously some creative licenses were taken with the show, but I really enjoyed it. It I think one of the best things about it were the interviews that they showed of the agents interviewing the serial killers.
Yes.
Those were recreated from real interviews. And I mean, I don't know if all of them were, but
Right.
there were a few that I recognized. Like, this is from the real interview that I had seen. And it was just, the acting was just phenomenal, in my opinion.
No,
And
I thought they did. I thought
so
they did a really good job.
I loved it. Now, accuracy, yeah, I think there were points in there, with the way John Douglas describes, the unit getting started, and sort of the thought that they weren't getting a lot of support. I think that's all probably rings true to me, but I wasn't there, so I don't know for sure. But I watched the show just for pure enjoyment without being critical of it. Like, that would never happen. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that. So, but I loved it.
And
It was
was it was
great.
it was it accurate as far as the book that was written?
No, it was different. I think there were parts that were based on John Douglas's book, but I think they took creative license with some of the storytelling, and
I
the
mean, Hollywood
you know
always
the
does that.
agents they were based on John Douglas and Robert Ressler, I believed, but they were not. I don't think it was entirely accurate about their
Okay.
backgrounds,
Okay.
to my knowledge. So, but
Now,
it's still, to me, the show did seem very authentic.
let me ask you: during your time, I don't know, in the academy or any time during the FBI, did you meet either one of these gentlemen?
I met John Douglas.
You did.
I never met Robert Ressler. He unfortunately passed away, and I just never had
Okay.
an opportunity to meet him. But I did have a squad mate who was, when he was in the FBI Academy, Robert Ressler was one of his instructors, and he thought he was the greatest instructor. It was one of his favorite blocks of instruction at the Academy. But I did meet John Douglas several years ago at a Crimes Against Women's conference where he was the keynote speaker. So I got there really early, and I was so excited. And I thought, I'm going to introduce myself. And I was nervous, and I got there, and much to my surprise, and I mean, he was there already, and he
Mhm.
was the only one in the auditorium. He was standing over by the water, and I walked up to him and I introduced myself and told him, I'm with the FBI's BAU. He could not have been nicer. He was just really nice to talk to. He did tell me, like, he's like, I like to get, to these things early so I can be prepared. And I'm
Yes.
like, I'm just like that. I said, totally get it. So I was kind of profiling him. I thought maybe he'll be there early. And so I had maybe a 5 to 10 minute conversation with him. He was very nice to talk to and very generous with his time. And I said, well, I'm not going to bother you anymore. But I heard the keynote speech that he gave, and then I also was able to hear his presentation. So
Very nice.
that was my interactions with Mr. Douglas.
Right.
And I, I really value what John Douglas, and not just John Douglas did, but there were just so many other agents that were involved in the starting of the unit. Now, John Douglas and Robert Ressler are two of the most famous, but there were so many others that were involved that aren't as well known. And I just value all the work that they did at the time to get the unit started, because I never would have had that opportunity had it not been for them. So I just wanted to thank him. Thank you
Yes.
for your service, sir. It was my honor to meet him.
Good, good. Yeah, well, it's nice that it worked out that way, because you don't always want to meet your idols, you know?
So
Sometimes,
true.
yes, sometimes they
That
can
is
disappoint
true.
you.
He did not. He was very kind to me, and so I'm just glad I
And
have that
were you
story to
already
tell.
retired at the time?
No,
You weren't retired at the time.
no, I was not retired at the time. Yeah, I was still working. So it's a number of years ago. I can't even remember how long. Is maybe 2015, 16, something like that. It was a while ago. But yeah, I am glad that I came away with a good experience having introduced myself to him, because I was pretty nervous. But I'm
Yes.
like, I got it. I have to. I would really kick myself if I miss this opportunity
Yeah.
to say hello and thank him.
Now, back to your time, all right? We'll forget about your idols now. We'll go back to your time as as a profiler, okay? Because I know people
Mhm.
are going to want to hear this too. How many? Do you have any idea how many different cases you worked on as a profiler?
If I tried to estimate, I'd probably overestimate.
You probably overestimate.
Yeah, I probably would. Now, it really depends on the case. So I worked on the case that was known as the Golden State Killer. I was the lead
Yes,
profiler on that.
I know that.
That case,
Yes.
yeah, that case in and of itself had, let's see, probably 100 or so cases in the case itself. Like, it was like I wasn't just looking at one homicide. I was looking at 12. I wasn't just looking at one sexual assault case. I was looking at 50.
Yes.
So that, and then combined with the burglaries that I was looking at, that the investigators at the time didn't know for sure, or didn't know, I guess they were uncertain if they were connected to him, if it was the same
Hmm.
offender. So that case just had so many cases within that big case. And then I had several like I said, single homicide cases. I did work some white collar cases as well, because of my background, and most of those cases were providing interview strategies of potential subjects or witnesses in cases like that.
Well, again,
you
back
know,
to what we were saying before, how profiling isn't, the public, so many of our listeners believe that profiling is almost strictly wrapped around serial killers, which it is not. That's, first of
no,
all, there's very few serial killers. That is a tiny, tiny amount. But yes, you would even use that for white collar crimes. If it's an unknown perpetrator, you have to build a profile to kind of help point all the investigators in the right direction. Correct?
sure. Yeah. Either that, or who it is and you need to interview them,
Hmm.
and you want to have the best strategy to make them vulnerable to
Hmm.
you and providing information. And you don't want to approach, you need to know a lot about them,
Yeah.
and you don't want to approach them in a way that's not going to work or resonate with them. So we would do personality profiles of subjects, witnesses in white collar cases, and provide those interview strategies to investigators. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Serial murder is a pretty rare occurrence,
Yes.
and so most of the cases that I worked on were not cases of were not series.
Yeah.
But I would say the FBI's BAU probably sees more serial murder cases than anybody in the world. So I've been exposed to
Sure.
more serial murder cases than most people or investigators would be. But the majority of my work was just, I would say, single homicides,
And
that
how
unsolved, colder cases.
well that That you actually just took my next question out of my mouth here. So with a giant one like the Golden State Killer, but with so many others, I would imagine that many of them, they are cold cases. They've been dead for quite some time as far as the local municipalities are concerned. And I can only imagine, as a detective myself, it's much, much harder to start. Again, on your end, you're trying to build a profile. You're trying to seek out who all the other agents and detectives and police should be looking for. But is it harder, or are there benefits to the case being that old on your
Yes.
end?
Yeah,
You get what I'm
sometimes there are benefits to having a colder case because more investigative work has been done. Sometimes if a case comes to the BAU a little too early, we send people back out saying we need you
saying?
to do this, we need more victimology, we need to find out this information. But by the time, if you have an older case, there's often, forensic testing that's been completed and there are results. There are the victimology has been well developed.
Yeah. Hmm.
The certain alibi people who have been alibied, we can rule them out. And we're not, and when we're doing a profile, we're not necessarily looking at suspects and ruling them in or out. We're building the profile and then we give it to the police department and then they overlay their suspects. It's kind of the best way to do it. Now, a lot of times we will know who their suspects are, but you really do have to block that out because you don't want to get tunnel vision. But yeah, there is a benefit to older cases. And not only that, you have cases that can benefit because of development of technology or because relationships change. Like, investigators
Yes.
may get a cold case and they're like, okay, I'm going to dive into this. And they go back and they interview people that either were never interviewed to begin with, or they, so much time has passed and that person may be in a much different situation in their life and they may have information they wish to provide now that they didn't want to provide
Sure.
then. So there definitely benefits to the
Now
cold
that happens
cases.
so often with a homicide where, you know, everybody's, as we say, D&D, deaf and dumb at the
Mm-hmm.
scene. Nobody knows anything. But as time goes on, as years pass, as people move out of the neighborhood, they're no longer afraid of the individuals that live in their neighborhood.
Right.
Somebody has passed away that we're afraid of. They're divorced and now they hate their spouse who, you know, they can rat on, or at least, or
Absolutely.
at least say they were involved somehow, which leads, it's always a stepping one step to the next direction. And sure, time that's what I was curious about. That on your end, a cold case may actually give you more information than, well, you just said it. You answered it
Mm-hmm.
directly.
Yeah.
What do you do now if there is a current case going on? Run us through, when I say us, again, our listeners through, how do you begin to build a profile? How do you put a profile together? Kind of
Well,
a step by
yeah.
step, if you will.
So what I want to caveat is I think every profiler maybe has a different approach, maybe has
Sure.
things that they consider, um, things that they would consider before they would consider other things. Like, so for me, my strength being crime scene, I want to look at, and usually we usually have this information, but I want to look at crime scene photos. I want to look at autopsy photos and the autopsy report, any lab reports that may be available. Sometimes we don't have the results. For example, we worked on, I'm trying to think of a case. We worked on a homicide out of San Francisco. It was so early on that it was clear the offender very likely injured himself and his blood was in the victim's apartment, but we didn't have the results of the DNA. So we didn't know for sure. So you're blindly and assuming that's likely the offender's blood. But that's where I start. And that for me is my strength, is like trying to piece back together what actually happened here.
Hmm.
Is this, does this appear to be something that was planned? Does this appear to be something that escalated, didn't start off as a planned homicide, but it escalated that because of a fight? And you're taking all that information, the crime scene photos, the injuries to the victim, the laboratory res- reports, the area that's involved, the victimology. That's the other problem. When you get a case a little too soon, you may not have a full picture of the crime victim.
Hmm.
We ask a lot of questions about victims because, and it's not to victim blame, it's not to shame or or in any way be disrespectful. It's not why we ask the questions. We ask the questions because the more you know about your victim, the more you know about your offender. We want to know everything
Absolutely.
possible, because
Absolutely.
that's telling us where in their life they had a risk. Are they high risk? Are they
Hmm.
low risk? What kind of, and that may inform us where their, risks in their life came from.
Hmm.
So that's really important. So those are the areas I really focus on, and I think are absolutely, I don't want to say absolutely necessary because sometimes we don't have them, but are the fundamentals for me for trying to start building a profile. And really, I'm really trying to at very first try to determine, does this seem more planned? Does this seem more random?
Yes.
Does there appear to be escalation here? The other thing I'm looking for, is there more than one cause of death? Was this an offender who was inexperienced and and a lot of times when you see some of the most gruesome crimes that appear like this person had to have done this before, then you realize there's multiple causes of death. They're very inexperienced. So that's why you're seeing this didn't work. So they're trying this, or they're
Yes.
not really, they've never killed before. So they don't realize the damage that they've done is enough to kill somebody. So it's overkill. So these are all the things you're trying to assess when, in what I'm going to say, it's not easy, and you're not always going to be right. It's really just trying to compile all the available information into into this assessment.
Correct. Correct. No, I mean it's basically exactly what any detective does on any case is, you have to compile as many facts as you can. Many of
Mm-hmm.
them may be distasteful. You have to ask so many questions again, and many people may find them off color or distasteful also. But if you don't know, how in the world are you supposed to do your job?
Yeah,
It becomes an
yeah,
impossibility, you know?
exactly. Yeah, if there's a big gap in victimology, you may not know that they had this risk level
Sure.
over here. But then there are times where you do victimology and they're very low risk, and usually that means, well, it's probably someone close to them because
Yes.
they don't have a risky lifestyle. They're not exposed to a lot of danger, and they don't put themselves in situations where they could be victims of violent crime. But that's also not always the case. There are times where very low risk victims become victims of opportunity,
Yes.
and so you're assessing every bit of information that is available that investigators can uncover. And the one thing I do want to say, in case I forget it, is that the FBI, as a profiler, I do not take over a case. We don't take over the case. It is that agency's investigation. It remains their investigation. All we're doing is providing another set of eyes, and stepping back, applying our own education, experiences, and knowledge to these cases, and they can take our assessments or leave them. They don't have to.
Well, that's what we always said, it was case enhancement, you know. Um,
I like that term.
yes.
I hadn't thought about that. Usually people call it a tool, which I
Yes.
think is a little
People
cliche, but
don't
I like.
realize, like in the New York City Police Department, okay, yes, there are homicide detectives, but homicide detectives don't. How can I say this? The homicides fall to the squad detective. It is his case. If you are working the squad in your precinct, that homicide is your case. It doesn't belong to anybody else. There's no bosses that are in charge of it. There's no other detectives. But if it's a heavy case and you're really having difficulty with it, then the borough command will assist you with the homicide task force, who will come and enhance your case. And they'll do it through experience or just through manpower. Because again, what people don't realize, unlike television, where you watch TV and you're watching whatever program it is, and they have 8 different detectives working on this homicide. No, it's you by
Hmm.
yourself with your partner who has his own cases to work. So he's helping you because no man is an island, all right? And then if you're really stuck, the homicide detectives will come and give you a hand. And even then, it is to enhance your case. It's to polish it up, to maybe open that window or that door that you didn't peek in, or just a fresh set of eyes. And that's exactly what you're doing as a profiler. You're coming in to say, hey, did you think of this? Or, this might help you out. Or, I know you're looking for, this ABC suspect, but how about we go with XYZ instead? Correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I would say most of the time when we've given profiles, the detectives, it's just reinforcing maybe what they already thought.
Yes.
It's not necessarily like I feel like when law enforcement agencies have come to the BAU sometimes it's because the psychic didn't work. They're kind of like
Yes.
like we got nothing to lose. Let's try this and see.
Yes.
So we're sometimes a last resort. No offense taken. Sometimes we are a last resort, but many times I find that we are just and we're not just trying to agree with them. Like
Yes.
we really do we have a lot of strong opinions when it comes to detectives. They may have a specific suspect and they want you to validate that. So we're not doing that. But we take into account certainly their expertise, their knowledge of their area, the crime problems, their intuition when they've interviewed somebody. We listen to that. But oftentimes, when we do a profile and offer observations, many times it's what they were already thinking.
Yes.
And it just helps to, I guess, conserve resources, help focus things for them,
And you,
and maybe think of things that they hadn't thought of.
you just said a word that I want to kind of bounce off you too, and I may have even asked you this already, so I'm sorry to everybody if I did. But how much of your work as a profiler do you find is intuition and or evidence based? I mean, like anything, a good investigator, period, regardless of what it is, there's an awful lot of experience and intuition that goes into it. Yes, you have to have the evidence to prove your case, but quite often it is that, that street knowledge or that narcotics knowledge or, knowing the, I'm sorry, the stereotypical behavior of, your suspects that brings you to these conclusions, right? And on your end, you know, how much of it is, yes, the evidence pointed me here, but I also just kind of know it.
Hmm. Well, I think our intuition gets informed by our own experiences. Like we have
Absolutely.
this intuition because we have this experience, we've seen it before. So, I would say, like, to be technical, I would say my intuition plays very little because what we're doing is we're applying statistics and probabilities.
Yes.
So that's why you can never be 100% right all the time because you're
Yes.
you're looking at statistics. For example, a case I worked, double homicide, two little girls murdered, and with two different weapons. And the prevailing thought was it had to be two offenders.
That's what I would say right away.
Yes, and that is, I think, something people think a lot when you have multiple
Sure.
victims. You likely have multiple offenders. Well, statistically, no.
Hmm.
And I had looked up the statistics. Statistically, when you have multiple victims, you overwhelmingly have only one offender. So
Interesting.
unless you can see something that absolutely has to have been done by two people, like something that had to have happened, like let's say simultaneously, like in this particular case two different weapons were used, but it was very possible. It wasn't like one victim had all one kind of caliber in her and the other one had a different caliber. It was clear that what could have happened was they were both shot with one weapon and then the offender got another weapon and came back and shot them again.
Yes.
That was very that was in piece then that came to piecing back what actually happened, not just jumping to the conclusion it had to be two because there's two guns. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, let's piece this back together. That's where my forensics came to be very valuable in cases like that. So then when you're seeing like, okay, you don't have anything that happened here that could not have been done by one person. So therefore, statistically, it has to be one, or not has to be, it is most likely one
Most likely.
offender.
Correct.
Most likely. And so, that my initial response, just based, before I had any training, before I had seen a lot of cases, I might have just said, my intuition tells me it's got to be two people. But now that I have the experience I have, I've seen the cases that I have, my intuition now is always, when you have multiple victims, my intuition is you likely have one offender. Now, that could change as you look at the evidence in the case, as you look at the dynamics of the crime scene, that could very well change. But I would always default to one offender if there's nothing that suggests you had to have two offenders or more than one offender.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question, I don't know that I think intuition is developed from experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe now a lot of intuition does go into it because
Yes.
I'm pretty old now. So I got a lot of intuition. My intuition has evolved based on experience and exposure to different cases and to the research that's out
Right.
there.
Are there any cases, or I should say, not cases, types? Actually, before I say that, I'm going to tell you not a little story, a little thing to add to that about how sometimes things are not always as they seem. Where we had a case in the Bronx where somebody had been stabbed once but killed immediately. It had gone into their lungs and they died very, very quickly from the stabbing. And the stabbing was to the right side with the sharp part of the blade facing forward, which would tell you what immediately? That it was a left-handed, right? And so we immediately thought left-handed person because, you're trying to put these things together. But it had turned out in the end that was not true because the person doing the stabbing was holding a gun on the person they had stabbed with their right hand once the entire story came out. So they were right-handed, but because they held the pistol, as most people would do, hold the pistol with their dominant hand and stabbed with their left hand, we thought we were looking for a left-handed person.
Yeah.
And we were completely
And
wrong.
that's where statistics would have probably, if you just gone with what's most likely
Yes.
they're right-handed.
Well, most
Now,
people are in general, yes.
right, exactly. So statistically, it's likely right-handed. Maybe so as a profiler, this is how we would probably work through that. We'd probably say you can't rule out somebody who's left-handed,
Yes.
or maybe there are circumstances that were
Well,
involved in that particular case.
At the time,
Yeah.
the only evidence said left-handed. I mean, that just made sense,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in reality, it was not.
Yeah. I think how we would write that in a report is we would say this could possibly be a left-handed offender, but don't rule out a right-handed one because circumstances may have caused them to have to use a left hand in that particular case, something along those lines, just because statistically that would be, rare, not rare, but more statistically rare than a right-handed offender.
What cases did you find the most difficult to put together?
The most difficult cases are the ones where they're cold cases, evidence wasn't preserved as well, and you don't have anyone that was at the scene. Like the really old cases, it can be very challenging when you don't have like the original investigation or evidence has been destroyed. Those are very challenging. When crime scenes have been destroyed, those can also be very challenging. Now, the purposeful destruction of a crime scene does in and of itself tell you something as well.
Yes.
So if you see that, like, if, we did a case on my podcast recently where the offender set fire to the home. And so that tells us something. And the way that and where the fire was set told us some things about the offender. It actually gave us some insights. But those cases can be difficult because there was some, while she was fairly well preserved, there's probably still some things that were destroyed and part of the crime scene was destroyed. So that makes it difficult to determine exactly what happened in that home.
Hmm.
But yeah, so the destruction of crime scenes are difficult. When you don't have a body, those can also be difficult. The missing person cases are always challenging to do because you don't have a body, or a no body homicide.
Right.
Those can also be challenging.
And that, of course, everything affects the profile in the end because you just have less evidence to work with.
Yeah, yeah, and if law enforcement who's listening to this, if they've ever read any of our reports, we always there's a lot of caveats in it. Like,
Yeah.
well, if we get more information, our profile could change. It,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
it's only as good as the information that we have at the time, and it's coming from a hard science
Right.
background,
Sure.
it can be challenging for somebody like me that wants definitive answers to not
Hmm.
have those, and to say
Yeah.
we
You
may
always got.
never
You always got to
have
throw
them.
that disclaimer in there.
Yeah.
Save face. So.
Yes, exactly. It makes it easier when maybe you're wrong,
So where would you find now, and I certainly don't want to disparage any of your work or your colleagues' work, but where do profilers often get it wrong? What mistakes are often made? I mean, is it like anything where there are, I'm sure every individual is going to be different too, and every case is going to be different. But where do you find now when you look back on cases or when you're studying cases, trying to learn how to correct things? What are the mistakes that are often, you know, more common, I guess?
Yeah. Really, where we tend to make mistakes. I feel pretty good about behavioral analysis if we are dealing with all the information possible.
Yes.
And I do feel good about that. When you're lacking information, that can make it more challenging. I'll give an example. Golden State Killer case. Now, my profile of him, I thought he would be older than he was when he was
Okay.
arrested. Now, and I have reasons for that. However, I always thought, oh, I got the age wrong, but I put in such a wide range that I actually did get the age range right. But in my mind,
Yes.
when he was arrested, when Joe D'Angelo was arrested, he's older than what I thought he was. And, come to find out, I did not know that there was another series of burglaries that were up closer to the Sacramento area that
Yes.
investigators now think he was likely responsible for. So when I was looking at the series of crimes, there were some burglaries that were done about 4 hours south of Sacramento. And those are the ones I was looking at. I thought that's likely where he started. So I thought he was younger at the time. But he actually started, I believe now, earlier.
Years
And I didn't
before.
have those cases to look at. So I wasn't aware of them. So and then this is what threw me off too, because I didn't have, I put him on the lower um, range of age. I also didn't believe that he had been old enough to have served in the military. And there were a lot of aspects to the crime that suggested he at least had a strong interest in the military, that he
Right.
may have had some training. There was something I was pretty strong about. I did feel he had had some kind of formal firearms training. He was very skilled at using a firearm. He stole some firearms in his earlier burglaries that he then subsequently used in crimes. And so when I was doing the profile, and he would he would say things to victims saying he was in the military. Like, I saw you at the club, or I'm stationed over here. It's stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like, giving, when I was in the military, I did this, this, and this. But he made it sound like he was in the military at the time. Now, what I thought about that was that he took such great pains at disguising himself. He wore a mask. He used a flashlight to blind his victims. He talked he tried to change his voice. And so I thought, there's no way he's going to give away a piece of information that could actually lead to his identification. So I didn't think he was in the military while he was committing his
You
crimes. And a
thought he
lot of
was
people,
giving this disinformation to throw you off.
I definitely thought,
Yes.
yeah. And so, and some of the theory was he was moving around California because he was going from military base to military base. And a lot of this was based on description of his clothing, the things that he told victims during the commission of his crimes. But then when you kind of look at the area, when you look at California, you could live anywhere and maybe live close to a military base. So But because of my assessment of his age, I thought it was unlikely he had ever served in the military. And I certainly didn't think he was in the military at the times of his crimes, because I just thought he's not going to tell them something. So I said, I wouldn't necessarily be looking for as a priority someone who was in the military during these times. Now, when he was arrested, I was surprised to find out he actually had served in the military many years before.
Yes.
You know, had I had information that his crimes may have started much earlier than I knew when I was doing the analysis, I might have said he might have served in the military at some point, but I didn't think he was in the military when he was committing his crimes. So that's how you can get things wrong. And that's why you have to caveat this could be wrong. Don't
Yes.
rule out. If you have a good suspect that doesn't fit a profile, do not rule them out. Prioritize them. You prioritize, this guy fits this profile really well. Prioritize him until you can rule him out, but don't rule somebody out just, because they don't fit a particular
Correct.
profile.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that it was a case I personally worked on that I know, I didn't get that right.
Something that I've said many times, and I find the problem with detective work, investigative work, which is somewhat similar to what you're saying, and I know we chatted about it a little bit before, was confidence. And what I mean by that is, yes, you obviously, when you put the handcuffs on somebody, you want to be confident that you're right. But quite often, believing somebody is guilty before you've checked every box and just investigated and investigated and investigated, unless it's glaringly obvious, confidence can get in the way. Do you
Oh
understand
yeah,
what I'm saying?
I do.
Confidence, knowing that this guy is guilty, well, you might be wrong. So you better
Yeah.
be 100% sure.
Yeah.
And
I
that's where
call that tunnel vision too.
well,
Like you're
exactly. Yeah,
so,
you mentioned that
yes.
earlier about tunnel vision, where
Yes.
you key in on, I mean, anything, you know, name a thing that's going to pull you into it. It's got to be a man. Might not be a man.
Right.
It's got to be a somebody of a X amount of strength, or particularly fast, or able to climb a fence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one element of that story is wrong, and your suspect completely changes. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good to keep an open mind.
yes,
It's good to remember you might not have all the information. So, and then, I have had cases where the investigators had a great suspect
yes,
and that did fit the profile. And I thought that could really be the person. And then it turns out it's not.
yes,
So but then, that's the case when I was talking about the double homicide of the two girls, they did have a pretty good suspect that fit the profile, somebody that they had already identified. And but ultimately it turned out to be somebody else who actually fit the profile much better. So but that's not my job to say that's your person. There's profiling cannot identify an offender and it cannot solve crimes. That's not what it does.
yes,
But then once they did identify this particular offender and they linked him forensically to the crime scene, so I felt pretty confident at that point. Then because of the profile and because we knew personality traits and characteristics, and we learned even more about him through doing a background on him, then they were able to do a very good interview of him. And he ultimately admitted to committing the crime. So that's
very good.
how, you can kind of use the profile to actually continue. It's not just here are the characteristics. Well, once you've identified someone, how do you use those characteristics to best interview them?
Yeah. How often have you found that, and sadly, um, police detectives or FBI agents or whoever it may be doing the investigations will use the profile as evidence and sadly
That's
pick up the wrong people? Does that happen often?
no.
No?
I It's never happened in any cases. I
That you
feel
know of?
that the detective that I know of,
Yeah.
I feel like when I was in the unit and the work that I did and the work that I did with my colleagues, the detectives that we worked with really understood the limitations and how to view it. Like some people, like you'd have a detective that would really just be all in on the profile, and they were just like, this is, yeah, I totally believe it. And then you'd have detectives that were like, this is terrible.
Mhm.
You don't know what you're doing. You're completely incompetent. It's true. We we had a detective who slammed his, like, we did the profile of the offender, and when we were looking at their suspects, there was one particular suspect that fit pretty well. We're not saying he did it. We're saying he's a good suspect here, and there's one detective that really didn't think it was him, and he stood up, he slammed his badge on the table, and he said, if you're right, I'm turning this in. Unfortunately, the case remains unsolved to this day,
Right.
so we don't know who's right.
Uh,
So he probably finished his career and didn't have to turn his
right.
badge in. But I forget what the question is. What was your question? I'm so sorry. What
Um,
did,
oh no, I think we just kind of went off because I had
I
asked
know.
if you were aware of any cases where
Oh, where they got
investigators used a profile as evidence.
no. So no, I can't think of
Good.
a case. What I'm sure there are,
Mhm.
and maybe one of your listeners say, "Well, I heard this story or this happened in a case," and I can't think of a case. What we try to do when we work with the detectives is let them know this is not something we'll, it's testimonial,
Yes.
because they can bring in the evidence. Like if they identify the offender and the evidence shows, they can testify to that. I mean,
Mhm.
our profile should not be used against anybody. It's really supposed to help the to make the um to clarify the investigation.
Yes. Yes.
If that makes sense, I hope
Well,
it
like we said
does.
before, to enhance the investigation,
To enhance
to
it.
point the detective in a possible direction, not even
Yeah.
necessarily the right direction.
Yeah. I
Well,
mean, and you'll hear people say, well, the profiler said this, or, but it's very rare that a profiler will testify. They have before. They've testified to certain things such as staging, like what staging a crime scene may mean.
right.
So they may testify to concepts, but I am not aware, and I, again, could be wrong because, it's a long history in the unit of different people, but I'm not aware of any time a profiler got on the stand and said, well, my profile is this and he did it.
Mhm.
I'm not
Well,
aware of that.
speaking of the history now, okay, and
Hmm.
I'll ask you maybe this last one, and then I'll let you go because I know you got other things to do besides talk to me. But what do you call it? That this unit, the behavioral unit, has been around since what, the mid 70s?
Yeah.
About that long?
Yeah. Maybe longer, a little bit
Do
longer.
you
Yeah.
find? I mean, has it grown in your time, and is it continuing to grow? Is this a growing field as far as within law
Yes.
enforcement? Is it getting bigger and better as we move on?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
it's always evolving.
Yes.
If just as an example, if you read a report from even the early 90s versus a report that would be written today, that there's a stark contrast to how we write our reports. But is it getting bigger? Yes. When I started, there were the 3 units that I mentioned. Now they have a cyber behavioral analysis unit,
Hmm.
so they're looking at cases involving hackers and cyber crimes and things like that. So obviously that wasn't in place. They had just started it when I left. So, and then there's another unit that was started. It's a research unit, so it's just for research. So yes, as things evolve, it is getting bigger. It's much bigger now than when I was there because they've expanded the units, and certainly the FBI or the BAUs have to evolve as the FBI evolves and as the FBI priorities evolve. So I think it's probably still the case where probably the terrorism unit is the largest
Right.
unit, and the crimes against adults is probably the smallest, just because that tends to be the most of the work are, as I said, the homicides.
Yes.
Those are not Homicides typically are not FBI
Correct.
jurisdiction, so it's a lower priority for the FBI. So more less resources are allocated toward a unit like that. But because of terrorism, yes, the BAUs have grown. It's gotten much bigger. Now, a lot of these units overlap because you may have a terrorist attack, but the victims are adults. And so the units all work together. They bring their expertise in. You may have a mass murder where you have the terrorism unit and the crimes against adults unit working together. You may have a serial killer case where the offender has adult victims and child victims. So the units all work together. One unit may be the lead, but another unit may come in and help. But yes, it has evolved and it's grown exponentially since the early days.
Very good. Very good. Are you happy to be retired?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, did I say that too fast?
No, not at all.
Yeah. I love being retired. I think with a lot of people in law enforcement, I was ready to retire. I knew I was ready, but I also felt this sense of that I wasn't going to have an identity anymore if I wasn't able to say I was
I
an
can understand
FBI
that.
agent. Yeah, it was
I
a
can understand.
very the day, the day before my last day, I had to drive to the Boston office. I was in a satellite office when I retired, and I had to turn in my gun and my credentials. And now you get your credentials back. They put them in you can see them right there.
Yeah.
they put them in a nice little place. You get them back, but you have this period of time where you don't have them. Those credentials were with me
Yes.
all the time. I never let them go practically. I might set them on my dresser, but
Sure.
I just felt this sense of who am I anymore? I'm like, I don't know. It was just a very hollow, empty, sad feeling that I wasn't expecting. The next day I woke up and I was thrilled.
Yeah.
I'm done. So, I mean, you learn to adjust, but I
Sure.
am very happy. I was ready. I look back and, I feel very fortunate to have the career that I had, even the bumps in the road that I had occasionally. I don't regret anything. I can't imagine having done anything else.
Very good. I like that. That's a good
Yeah.
answer. All right.
Yeah.
Now, I know I told you, 2 questions ago that would be my last question, but I got one more for you. And I don't know
Okay.
if this is actually a question or a request or both, but
Okay.
you, please, are going to come back. And I think maybe we do a whole deep dive on the Golden State Killer, because I know that my listeners would love to hear all the ins and outs that you had to do with that. Would you
Sure.
like to do
I'd
that?
be happy to. Yeah. You want to see how this show does first?
No, I
Or-
don't. I like you enough. I don't have to worry about what they think. All right?
I'd be honored to come back, Travis. I've really
That would be
enjoyed
great.
talking with you. Yeah, it's been fun. I'm so glad we met.
Me too, Julia. You're a doll. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on. And if I don't talk to you before September, I will see you in September down in Denver.
Yes, you will. Looking forward to it.
All the best there. Take care.
You too.
All right. Julia Cowley, everybody. That woman's done a lot of good work in her life. If you want to catch up with more from Julia, she has her own podcast called The Consult Podcast, which you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just like us, right here on the Another Nobody podcast, you can listen to me anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as on the YouTube. Just go right to the For Boston's Media channel, and you'll find us there, where we post all kinds of silly nonsense for you to check out. So until next time, my friends, please hit that like, hit that subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, how you doing? Another nobody here, Travis Myers. This one's going out in particular to all my drinking friends out there, because I got a new favorite thing, and it's called Shanky's Whip, and it is magical. It's Irish whiskey mixed with a little caramel, a little cream, a little vanilla, and it's heavenly. What more can I say? I suggest you pick up a bottle. You can have it as a shot with a cold beer, like I like. On the rocks, it's great. Mix it with a little cola. I promise you, you're going to love this stuff. Next time you raise a glass, think of me,
another nobody, Travis Myers. Hey, do the right thing. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my nonsense. All the best, my friends.
Buy our books!
Listen up. This one's important. I'd like to try to encourage you, please, to give to the Stephen Siller Foundation, Tunnel to Towers, at T2T.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org. Do good for those who've done good for you.